All right, so we've covered some basics of drawing, just some of the fundamentals of observation, how to simplify our objects into basic shapes. Now we want to take those line drawings a little bit further by adding some tone, capturing those highlights and those shadows. And we're going to try to do that with some shading. Now, I'm just going to show you the basics right now of shading. And that's going to begin with, what we've already talked about, but pressure, how we're holding the pencil and how much pressure we're applying to the paper. Now with shading, it's, you kind of want to use the side of the pencil. So that's going to be difficult to do if you're holding your pencil this way. But if you're holding it with the overhand grip, or I like to kind of hold it further back, this way I can kind of control how much pressure a little bit better. So it's kind of up to you, you got to feel out, but just be aware you really want to get that side of the pencil to be making contact with your paper. If the side is making contact, then you should have some broader strokes basically, and much more smoother, versus if it's the tip, you're going to get more true lines, and that's what we don't want to see. Whoops, you can't really see that, can you? There you go. So we want to get more broader strokes versus lines, right? So this is what we want to see there. What I'm going to try to do is just a little value scale, and this is what you're going to be practicing as well. I'm going to just kind of start a continuous scale starting from dark to light. So holding the pencil a little bit further back, not too worried about how much pressure I'm applying, because I'm starting off dark, so I can always add more pressure as I kind of figure it out. So right around there, so that looks pretty dark. I don't want to be pressing so hard in my paper that I start to make it shine, or I'm denting my paper, damaging my paper, so that's something to be aware of. But just starting off, seeing how dark of a tone I can kind of create. I'm going up and down right now. Now, depending on what you're doing, some people like to go in just one direction, or they like to make small circles as they kind of create their tone, create their shading. But for right now, I'm using just a up and down stroke, trying to keep it as even and as consistent throughout. Now I'm starting to kind of move forward, you could say, and loosening the pressure, going a little bit lighter with my pressure, a little bit lighter tone. I can always go back over this if I want to make it a little bit darker. Just kind of making it as consistent and as smooth as possible. Now, depending on what's going on with your paper, how much tooth, how much texture you have, that might change the consistency of that smoothness in your shading. Next part to shading, so if that's one continuous value scale, let's say, I'm calling this a value scale. Pretty sure you guys are familiar with that, right? The next part would be to try and do one consistent value in a confined space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my H pencil over here, and I'm going to try, if I can see a little bit better, my light's a little bit off. I'm going to try and draw out something that looks like squares. How are we going to do this? I guess we're going to go from darkest to the lightest. I'm trying not to smudge that. I have a bad habit of smudging my drawings. So we want to kind of try and keep everything within that square there. So I'm going to use some control as I do this, but starting off with some medium pressure. Maybe I'll go a little bit slower because I don't want to get too far out of the box. Believe me, I'm an artist that believes that you shouldn't stay within the lines, but you got to know when to get out of the lines too. And there's a value to using control, at least understanding that you have that control and you know when to use it, if that makes any sense. Now let's just say I was going to go another box. Let's say I was going to do a fifth box. I think in this case I might actually switch to a different pencil lead. So the first four were done with 2B. Now we got an H pencil here. And I think if I was to go a fifth box, that I might flip it to the H. Let's see how this looks. I might have made a huge mistake just now. I don't know. It's a little bit harder to get the feel of the shading with the harder pencil leads like the H's. They just don't wear down the same way as the softer leads. So you're much more prone to getting lines in those white gaps. Exactly what we're trying to avoid. And I think the OCD part of me is kicking in a little bit. And I might just take my eraser and get rid of a little bit of this. Now if we had a smudge stick, what do they call those things, tortillions? We might take a smudge stick, blender stump, whatever you call it, and maybe we kind of smooth these out. Now I don't have one on me, but I do have a piece of tissue paper and a dull pencil. Is that a dull pencil? Yeah, it's kind of dull. So I might take this and, I don't know, maybe I'm jumping the gun, maybe this is a mistake. But you can kind of smooth out some of what you've done if you have a blender stick, or my MacGyver, if you guys know that reference, method. Be careful though as you do this, because if you go from a dark box to a little bit of a lighter box and there's too much graphite on the tissue, you might be setting yourself up for a rude awakening, going a little bit darker than you want it to. feel like I'm about to ruin my little demo here and kick myself in the butt and be like, ugh, all that time just to show you guys exactly what not to do. What you really should be thinking about, keeping in mind, is two things: pressure and pencil grip. All right, keep those two things in mind, because that's what's really going to help you, do some nice quality shading. And then if I do another video about this stuff, we'll take a closer look how to shade form, maybe start off some geometric objects and thinking about direction of light.